For the past 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, Nigeria has been having challenges that are beckoning and waiting for answers and solutions. That is why we are bringing to you our program, State of the Nation. And this is going to come up on our flagship program this morning on ITV. I am hereby inviting you to join me, Bola Bakare, your host, on State of the Nation, so that we can hasten the motions that brings national development. It's going to be a regular basis on Tuesdays. Make it a date with me. I'll be there waiting for you, and then we shall discuss Nigeria on an holistic level.
Good morning and welcome to your lofty program, State of the Nation, where we hasten the motions for national development. And when it comes to national development, you're part of it too. On our morning brief, we shall dwell on the sober situation of IDPs. By IDPs, I mean internally displaced person. Honestly, to be internally displaced in your own country is not a Nigerian thing alone. It is a global thing. It happens all over the world. Name the continent, it's there. It's all over the world. So let us talk in terms of our own IDPs and what we are doing in this wise to take care of them. The caption for today is going to be the principles and rights of IDPs. I'll rephrase that. The principle and rights of internally displaced persons. None of us is praying to be displaced. But honestly, there are instances that creates that displacement. It can be war, which you didn't ask for. It can be natural disasters, which also you didn't ask for. But as we speak, it is the duty of the government to take care of you if you are displaced. I repeat that again. It is the duty of the government to take care of you if you are displaced because you have a right to it. And honestly, the federal government of Nigeria is doing its own bit by putting in place a ministry to take care of that, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Honestly, it is not enough to just talk about humanitarian affairs and its obligations without touching on the guiding principles and the rights of internally displaced persons. That is why we're dwelling on the factor of the principles and rights of internally displaced persons. To start with, there are statutes on ground that guides these principles and rights of IDPs. We can talk in terms of the Kampala Convention, which is an African thing. We can talk in terms of Geneva Convention, which is a global thing. We can talk in terms of the United Nations general principles that guides IDPs. So basically, IDPs are, the principles and rights are there for us to imbibe. And what we're going to do this morning is, we're going to factor in that element of information dissemination, because information is key. We are not praying that we will be displaced. But when it happens, there is need for us to know what the principles are and what our rights are. For those that are displaced in Nigeria as we speak, you might think, oh, well, it's not my business. It is your business because they are fellow Nigerians. You might even be surprised if you stretch your family lineage a little bit longer. You'll find out that some of those displaced are members of your own family. So sit back a little bit and learn some of the tenets, some of these principles and the rights, which when you see it, that is happening and is not according to the norm, you will be able to say something along those lines. Along the lines of what we say vis-a-vis the Federal Ministry of Information, that if you see something, say something. But what we're saying here is, before you say something, make sure that what you're saying is based on facts and figures that you must have learned from what we're going to give across to you this morning. This morning we'll talk about, first and foremost, let's deal with the element of the principles of IDPs. I am going to reiterate, I'm going to say them in bits so that we can understand better. I'm going to kind of tabulate them and itemize them. One of the principles is the principle of respect of sovereignty. By that notion, I mean it is the duty of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to take responsibility to protect and assist outside of the norm, which our Constitution says it is the duty of the federal government to take care of the welfare of life and property of the people. In terms of the IDP, it is the responsibility of the federal government vis-a-vis the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to protect and assist IDPs. That is one. Another one is the principle of empowerment. That is the government. Same again, vis-a-vis Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, to provide empowerment for the people that are displaced. A kind of sustainable productivity. They are not lazy people. The only disadvantage they have is they have been displaced. So it is the duty of the government vis-a-vis Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to empower the people so that they can be productive on their own. Another principle is the principle of participation. When it comes to principle of participation, the federal government vis-a-vis Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs must actively involve the IDPs and the host communities in forming a synergy in the management of the camps. Because the camps are within a host community. The host community belongs to a local government which belongs to a state. So there has to be a complete synergy to make sure that that principle of participation is being imbibed. Another principle again is the principle of accountability. Honestly, the federal government, the state governments, and some international humanitarian agencies are involved herein, because those are the sources of the funds. And then accountability, not just for resources alone, also for the actions of how the people, how the IDPs are being taken care of. Another of the principles again is the principle of humanitarian imperative. This says in normal terms that IDPs must be treated with dignity. I repeat that, with dignity, and not be seen as human beings and not as victims. We should remember that they are victims of circumstance. And those circumstances are not circumstances that they asked for. It is circumstance that is against their wish. So basically, that principle of humanitarian imperative is highly necessary. You should treat an IDP as a human being and not as a victim of circumstance. Another of the principle is a principle of non-discrimination. In other words, there should be no distinction in terms of ethnic group, in terms of religion, in terms of gender, in terms of either social or political leanings. These are some of the principles which we want you to think of, keep at the back of your mind, and when the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is doing its work, carrying out its obligation and mandate, you can be able to sit back and say, oh, what they are doing is in accord with the principles, both local and international principles of the IDPs, and then you can give them accolade where necessary. And you can put in advice where they fall short of what you think the principle says and what they are doing. Like I said earlier, it's a two-part thing. The second part deals with the elements of the rights of IDPs. They have rights too. And these rights are contained, like I said earlier, in the Kampala Convention, the Geneva Convention, the United Nations General Principles for IDPs. And as we say, as we know, information is key. We can learn from this too. I will give us a few bits of the rights of the IDPs. One, safety in any part of Nigeria. We're talking locally now. It is the right of an internally displaced person that is safety in any part of Nigeria is a given. There is another factor when you're displaced from your own primary environment. You have the right to leave Nigeria if you have the access. Another right you have is you have the right to seek asylum in foreign lands. If they will take you and if you're sure your stay is regularized according to the rules and laws of that country you wish to go. There is also the right to protection and assistance from the federal government. There is the right of protection from displacement. In this case, we're talking in terms of it shouldn't have happened at all, but there are some circumstances we cannot contain. Let's look at the kind of a circumstance of war. We don't ask for war, but they come on us. And then what we're looking at is our security architecture should be able to contain it if it's an internal insurgency or if it is an external insurgency or external aggression, which the army takes care of. Whichever way we want to look at it, it is the duty of the government to protect us from displacement. Though, at the same time, there are some displacements from Mother Nature. When Mother Nature is going at it, all we need to do is to listen to information that we are being given by agencies of government. Like in the case of NEMA will probably tell you, oh, there is flooding. Flooding is going to occur due to rains that are abnormal, and then you that are living on floodplains should please move away from there. In as much as you listen to all this information that agencies of government are churning out, you'll be able to save yourself. Now we go on to the rights of the IDP. There is another right of freedom of movement. One thing is, as a Nigerian, you have a right to move anywhere. When you become an IDP, you still have that right. You're not confined to a camp. You have a right of movement in as much as you're a productive person, you know what you're doing, you know where you're going, and you know what you are seeking. You have that right to freedom of movement. You are not stagnated in the IDP camps. So also is the right of displaced persons to seek information from government, agencies of government, about their missing family. Members of your family, you have a right to ask that, oh, some members of my family are missing, will you please give me a hand? Because earlier we said it is the duty of government to give protection and assistance. So you can at the same time ask for assistance in sourcing for your missing persons. There are agencies of government to take care of that. It is also a right of the IDP to maintain family unity. By this fact, I mean you can always say it at the camps that, oh, this is my brother, this is my children, my grandchildren, my uncle, my this. I want us all in the same place so that we can still maintain that family bonding that keeps us going. It is a right of a displaced person to ask for that. It is also a right of a displaced person to ask for adequate standard of living. They are not destitutes. They are displaced persons that have rights both locally and internationally. They have rights to health care. They have rights to education. These rights also expands to the children within the camps. They should be treated as such. Education, health, feeding, nutrition. The women in the camp, they should be treated as such. They should be protected from sexual abuse and then be given all the inadequate things, because honestly, they nurture and they run families. All the help and assistance they need to nurture the family they've been able to have around themselves within that camp. So also are people with disabilities at those IDP camps. They have a right to be treated. Maybe in the cases of impaired mobility, they have a right. They have that right to demand for special treatment. So also is the elderly. There might be a little bit have a shortfall when it comes to energy and the element of mobility or the element of productivity to make them live on their own. They have a right to be protected and assisted. And honestly, on a last note, there is always that right too, that, okay, I want to return back to my base. And when they return, the federal government is doing a lot vis-a-vis Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. Some of the places that are totally burnt down, the state governments and the federal government and the ministry in charge are putting up new structures, new houses for people to go back to. This is because it is the right of an IDP to want to return to home. It is the right again of an IDP to say, okay, I want to relocate to somewhere else in Nigeria. And it is the duty of the ministry itself to help reorientate and integrate such people into the new communities that they want to go into. In a nutshell, what we're saying this morning is, none of us prays to be an internally displaced person in your own country. But when that happens, you have the federal government vis-a-vis the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to take care of you. All we've been able to lay across to you, we are not praying for it, or for you to become an IDP, but anything can happen in life. When it happens, we've been able to educate you about the principles of IDP, about the rights of the IDP, and I can tell you for free, there is a Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to take care of you when situations like this occur. The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is not performing its obligations in isolation. There are other sister agencies like NEMA, SEMA, and the rest of them to take care of you. This morning, we have been able to give ourselves information which is key to life in itself. I would like to say thank you to our viewers, and thank you to Nigerians for being Nigerians and taking care of our brothers. In other words, to use that balance, we are our brother's keeper. We should endeavor to be more our brother's keeper.